People always talk about pursuing your passion or finding your dreams. But what about paying rent or making ends meet? In this episode, I asked myself if those two things are mutually exclusive, or can you actually do both? Hi, I'm Nadia, and you're listening to Scripted Unscripted, a podcast where I talk about my personal experience as a writer trying to make it and not always succeeding. Each episode covers big life concepts through small stories from my day-to-day. Sometimes my friends come to visit and we get to have a conversation about all of it, but no matter what, Scripted Unscripted is a way for me to share with you the joy and the pain of trying to live a fulfilling life. It's hard out there, man. Woman. People. It just is. Whether you're in a creative field, looking to get into one, or dreamed that someday you would, it's really hard. Or maybe you're just jumping around passions and haven't found your calling yet. Maybe you thought you found your calling, but once you got into it, it wasn't for you, and now you need to pivot. And let's face it, regardless of where you are in life, or what your journey looks like at the moment, you need money. So maybe you have one of those jobs that at least is in the industry that you want to be in, but you don't have enough experience yet to be doing the cool shit you want to be doing, so you're kind of miserable. Or maybe you have a job that's so far away from any of your passions, but it pays the bills. Or you landed your dream job, but it turns out it's not your dream after all. Let me assure you, I've been through all those scenarios on the road to finding myself and my passion. And that road was littered with frustrations, fun, and, odd jobs. I started out as a waitress during my time at film school in Boston. When I didn't have class, I was on my feet from morning till night, running around between tables, thanking the busboys, pleading with the sous chef, helping out the other servers, all the while balancing 3 plates on one arm and remembering my orders by heart. After college, I tried my hand at freelance filmmaking. I worked on a friend's documentary where I learned that LARPing is a thing. It's live action role-playing games, sort of like Dungeons and Dragons, but in real life. It didn't pay me any money, it just paid my travel and food, but it was awesome. It was such a cool experience. Then, I was tasked with producing a feature film for a restaurant owner who had no experience, a terrible script, and checks that often bounced. I ran around Boston trying to secure filming permits with the newly founded film commission that was built just because Scorsese came to town to shoot The Departed. Needless to say, they were not impressed with me, but I did get all their Scorsese stories, which made the whole thing worth it. After that, I was paid $100 to spend 4 days in New York City on a sci-fi short film as their assistant director. I'll never forget that job, because I had no idea actually what an assistant director does. But I took the bus to New York anyway, and when I landed, they gave me a car and asked me to pick up the director of photography and a bunch of equipment. Funny story, I picked up Vanya Cernul that day. Look him up, I'm still a huge fan. Reflecting back, I don't know what I was thinking, but I guess my bravery came from the limited options I had. I've always believed that you should say yes to any opportunity when you're first starting out, because everything at that time in life is a valuable experience. Then again, you're not exactly drowning in choices either. So there I was, fresh out of college in 2005, and in a tiny rental car driving around the biggest city I'd ever seen. At that time, there wasn't Google Maps, so I'd wake up in the morning and print directions to all the places I was going and do various random tasks to prepare for the shooting days.
Hey, quiet on the set!
Once we actually started filming, I just had to pretend that I knew what I was doing. It wasn't my first movie set, but everything before that was for student films. But hey, at least I knew that I would do my very best. And that's all I had going for me. Somehow, we finished filming in the right amount of time. I thought I had pulled it off.
And that's a wrap, everybody. Thank you.
As we were shaking hands and planning to go and get ready for the wrap party, a rugged crew member came up to me and gently told me that in the future I should label the slate. That's the black and white striped clapper thing that is smacked together before every take. Anyway, he told me I should label the slate with the scene number and then the shot and not the other way around. That's why everyone was so confused about what part of the script we were shooting. I would have been way more embarrassed, but I was too exhausted to have any profound emotions. Now that I look back on it, I laugh. I wasn't fooling anyone, but I was doing my very best, and I think they all recognize that. And that, ladies and gentlemen, of this podcast audience, is how I fell into production work. The same person who had hired me for that random short film thought I worked really hard and did what had to be done. So she sent my contact information to her friend in the city who was working on the Dennis Leary show called Rescue Me. Her friend had the job of key production assistant, or key PA. God, I wish I could remember his name, but I can still see his bushy beard and backwards baseball cap and cargo pants with a walkie-talkie around his belt. On my first day, I showed up on a typical New York City street. When I approached the exact location, I saw huge trailers and trucks lining the sidewalks. Some had camera equipment, another one had clothing, another one was the prop truck. That one had a group of people lined up behind it, and someone, who I would later find out was called the prop guy, was handing out random stuff to them. I was really nervous, but I managed to ask someone where the key PA was, and they pointed me to that guy I told you about. He was on a walkie-talkie.
Jason, what's your 20?
It was like he was speaking another language. I approached him timidly, and before I could introduce myself, he said,
"Hey there, new girl. You're late."
"But, wait, what? You told me what time to be here." My heart raced, already screwing up on my first day. I couldn't believe it.
I know, I'm just messing with you.
He laughed, and I realized I was holding my breath. He handed me a walkie-talkie and gave me some instructions.
We're on channel 1. Stay there unless I tell you to go to a different channel.
Oh, okay, I got it. And what do you need me to do now? He could see how eager I was, how starstruck, not by any stars, but just by the sheer size of a professional movie set.
Go stand over there. I'll call you when you need it.
I might as well have skipped over to this errant sidewalk next to the cooler of water bottles. The rest of the day was a whirlwind. I would answer all the calls and jump at any chance to get whatever was needed. That was my first job on a professional movie set, and it was another level of education. I got playfully hazed in my first few weeks there, sent on errands for equipment that didn't exist, or asked to make a profoundly gross snack for the director and then deliver it to her in front of everyone, only for her to tell me that she did not order it and that it was indeed very gross. I think it was peanut butter and avocado. Anyway, to me, having that professional job on a real movie set meant that I had my shit together, so I kept pushing along. Although these were not the most thrilling of jobs, they were in the realm of filmmaking, so I was technically living my dream. Keep in mind, that was when my dream was to work on movie sets and become a director. That would change later in life. But at that time, I was doing it, living the dream and so on. After that job, I got many more on-set roles and became very specialized. I did it all, and I could manage to walk on any movie set and get the job done. But it wasn't glamorous. I remember walking into my tiny apartment, my walkie-talkie and additional batteries still on my belt, my backpack weighing heavy. I had just come from a shooting day with Bradley Cooper and Robin Wright, but the first thing my roommate said to me was, "I guess it's not so glamorous after all." Although I loved it and learned more than I could ever explain to you, I knew that I wasn't doing exactly what I wanted to do. My dream had changed. So I really needed to give myself a chance. I transitioned out of the film production industry and was hoping to get into writing and development. But honestly, the only way I knew how to do that was to move out of town and not look back. I came to Lebanon to spend time in the homeland and reconnect with my dreams. But again, I needed money and, to get my shit together. When I moved to Beirut, I was only 28 years old and I had nothing because I started over. I moved in with my teta with no job and no friends, nothing. I got my first job organizing a cultural event and it paid me just enough to get by. Every end of the month, I would be completely out of money. This went on for 3 months, but I didn't care because in my free time, I was writing poetry. My next job was in sales. Okay, that one I hated, but I was really good at it. It was in a shady office with shady management, but can was part of the job description because I was selling ad space on the big screens at the festival. That job was the worst, but I was making ends meet. And you guessed it, I was still writing. So I'll take that as a success. Sometimes I would have some freelance copywriting clients. They would pay me something like 10 cents a word to write about air conditioners on their company website. I actually did do that. I learned about air conditioners. I always say, if you're getting paid to put words next to each other and form sentences that communicate something to someone, you're on the right track. In between, I would run occasional writing workshops. That's where I really came alive. I loved it. I was being inspired by new writers, and I had the privilege of inspiring them back. I opened my own boutique writing academy shortly after that, and I got to coach new writers on how to work with their own creativity and not against it. In that way, writers were able to gain the skills they needed to compete and, at least get their creative shit together, so to speak. I was making ends meet with my little business. I mean, barely, but I was. So could this be the time of my life when I actually had my shit together? I had the workshops to fulfill what I love, the random clients to subsidize my small little income, and I was still writing my own scripts and poems and short stories. But some months, I found myself putting in way more hours than what I was earning. But no matter what, I guess I had to believe that this was all leading somewhere, that someday I'd be a working writer, which means I'd be making a living doing this. I had to believe that this was not all in vain. I call this blind faith, a true belief that what you're doing is going to amount to something someday. You just have to stay the course. It got me thinking about how all my experiences leading up to where I am today, talking to you here on this podcast, is because of everything that I have picked up along the way. All the odd jobs had meaning now. Being a waitress was a goldmine for characters who were ready and willing to share their joys with me, especially when they were celebrating an occasion by coming to the restaurant where I worked. Working for myself in freelance filmmaking gave me the tough skin I would need when I got into the professional production world, where I had the chance to work side by side with some of the most talented and most difficult people that a person could meet. It was also a lesson in teamwork and camaraderie. I learned to be proactive and think on my feet. I had access to really impressive actors, cinematographers, and directors, all willing to talk to me about anything that I asked. I remember one time I got to ask the actor David Costable how he deals with a badly written scene, just in case, God forbid, I should ever write one. And his answer was an acting lesson in a nutshell. He told me, you read the line the way you think someone else wants to hear it. You get that out of the way. That's take one. Then you do another take with the backstory you've created. He did line read for me, and it was so cool how different the same words meant when he said them out loud. Then there was copywriting, those websites. Well, that forced me to communicate a story in a very short format, which gave me an edge when I would be selling my ideas in the future. Of course, being a coach and a mentor forced me to keep my skills sharpened and inspired me on a daily basis. This I know, and I can tell you all this confidently. But when I was still making ends meet, it would be hard to keep up this confidence, because it's much easier to tell yourself the bad and let it engulf the good. In other words, like all faiths, at some point it gets tested. That happened on the day my parents called me and said something along the lines like, "Obaden, Oshu, how long are you going to keep this up?" They were talking about my workshop-based writing company and all my other freelance jobs that were keeping me afloat. When are you going to get a normal job like your friends? They were referring to the fact that I was always broke and at this point in my 30s and working more hours than anyone should. That moment was a huge backpedal for me. All those successes I was just talking to you about, they disappeared and comparisons began. What about your friend with a corporate job in lighting design who has plenty of money and a savings account and a life and seems perfectly happy? What's wrong with me? What am I doing? Or the other friend who works a crazy amount, yes, but also somehow she has money for a gym membership and a work-life balance. How come I'm working the same crazy amount, if not more, but without any of those stable things? That's what faith being tested sounds like. It's a mishmash of what you yourself believe success to be and what the outside world believes it to be for you, and they are in constant battle. If any of this sounds at all familiar to you, it's probably because you've been through the ups and downs of wondering whether or not you have your shit together. If you do have a normal job or whatever, but you strive for more, it's possible you shame yourself for it. Like, what am I complaining about? I've got a good job. Why don't I just shut up? Maybe you feel like a brat for not being grateful for what you have, and instead you're always wanting more. Well, a few things can be true at the same time. You can be grateful for what you have, but also impatient that you haven't reached where you want to go. You can recognize your privilege and strive for more. You see, I would always have something that brought in money, but I treated writing like it was my second job. If someone has a meeting with their manager that they can't skip, I would have writing days that I couldn't skip either. If others had deadlines for their jobs, I had deadlines for my projects, and I took them just as seriously. But once my faith was tested, I did wonder if I should just give up on that second job thing and get an actual, real job. One day that real job came to me. I got a call from a close friend of mine who was a very talented creative director at a mega huge advertising agency. She had read some of my work, and it so happened that she was looking for a junior copywriter. I remember listening to her offer on the phone while I was climbing the stairs to the conference room I occasionally rented for my workshops. She told me I'd be working full-time, so I'd have to give up everything else, but I would move up very quickly within the agency. She mentioned the starting salary and the health insurance. It was 3 times what I had ever made up until that point. 3 times. So I took a small pause.
Hello? Nadia, can you hear me?
Yes, I'm here. I was still on the phone with her. I was just thinking about it. It was a lot of money. I know that my faith had been tested, and this would be an easy way out for me. But something was telling me that I just couldn't give up on my dreams. Not just yet. I knew it wasn't going to be easy, but doing what I love and doing that thing that brings me joy, I had to think that it would pay off. Regardless of how or when or the path it will take, it will pay off. I'm sorry. I thank you so much, but I really don't think I can accept this job. I can't.
Are you sure?
I could tell she was surprised because she saw me struggle financially, and this would make perfect sense, and it's a stable job. I'm sure, I said. I want to see where this writing thing goes. It was so cool to hear my friend say to me,
That's brave and amazing, and I know it will amount to something.
Years later, I was still juggling all these odd jobs and still writing my own projects when one of my students introduced me to a producer who heard that I did this writing thing and wanted to see if I could write a TV series. Damn right I can, of course I can. That's what I said at the time, but I didn't actually know how to write a TV series. It would be my first, but I knew that I had prepared for this. I had written so many pages of screenplay, this was a natural next step. I hired 2 writers that went through my training program. So all of it was coming together. All that I had worked for. I even used my sales training from that job that I hated to be able to pitch all the storylines to producers and investors. This felt like a really happy ending, right? But it is, but not exactly though. That first project did not end up being a great experience for me once it hit TV screens, let me tell you. But I learned a lot from it. The next one, which is called Awake, or in Arabic, Wa'it, would take everything out of me. But that was another really huge step, personally and professionally. Cut to, a year after Awake premiered in the region, Netflix arrives in the Middle East and everything changes. More jobs were available to screenwriters, TV was booming, and I already had 2 series under my belt. I really believe that writing is something you are forever learning, and the coming years would not be easy by any means, but the blind faith had finally paid off. Luck was involved, yes, but that's the thing. You have to be prepared when luck arrives. It takes bravery, I guess. Blind faith always does. Everything I am telling you today is nuanced for each person. You haven't failed if you take on the full-time job because you need it. And you also haven't failed if you decide that that's not the route for you. The idea is to also listen to that whisper in your head that's leading you towards your joy and take it just as seriously as you would all the rationalizations about work and life. It's just as important, and it is a defining part of success. Everyone has a different situation and needs to make different decisions in their lives. I wouldn't go so crazy as to quit everything and go live in the woods in order to write my next masterpiece. Although that does sound really nice. But no, that's not what this is about. It's about managing your dreams within your own reality, because you deserve it. The other day I was talking to a friend who has always wanted to be a writer. She's really frustrated because she has these huge goals and she never seems to reach them. It really got me thinking, maybe it's not about the huge goals in particular. Maybe it's more about cultivating a life that then gives you the opportunity to write and be creative and eventually meet those goals. I think it's exactly that. It's the cultivation of a type of life where your joy and passion is respected and given the time and space it deserves. I think that's the true success. Then those goals that we all have just end up being a consequence of a life well lived. If you can do that, then yeah, maybe you do have your shit together. Thank you for listening. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with someone who you think would appreciate it. And make sure you check out our social media space for some more relatable content on creativity. Scripted Unscripted is brought to you by CMS, yours truly Nadia, and of course my lovely producer Hind.